we're good to start. So this is designing a comic book page. Um, Welcome to all of you. I hope the information that I can give you today is useful in your art journey. And first of all, I'm Manuela O. I am an artist from Cali, Colombia, and I graduated from the Sequential Art program in 2022. Um, so I was at MaxDemat for 4 years studying illustration and sequential arts. I had a great experience. Of course, if any of you are interested, as I assume in MTM College, I will be very happy to answer any question about it. Right now I work mostly as a graphic designer, as a graphic designer, illustrator, and nail artist. So I'm interested in a bunch of stuff, and of course I'm pursuing comic books, and uh, I'm right now just working on my own comic book, and doing just everything about it to get it published. So let's begin. This is some of just a little taste of my art. Some comics that I have published on Instagram. These are a bit of my pages, illustrations, and you can find more about me on my Instagram and my portfolio website. So I'm not gonna bore you too much with that. And let's dive in directly into our subject. So what is sequential art or comics? So sequential art is more of a technical term. It's mostly known as comics, but I feel like it's the perfect term because, as I wrote here, sequential art is a term for art that uses images in a specific order to tell a story or convey information. So that's the perfect description. It's not reduced only to comics, because of course there's other types of art that are sequential, but again, it's just exactly what it is about: telling a story in a sequence of images and text. So we will be dissecting the process of a comic page in three stages: the script, the page, and the panel. So I'm gonna be this is gonna be very basic. So if you are more advanced in your knowledge about comic books, great. This will be a great way to just go back to basics. And if you're brand new and you're interested and you're not really sure about what a comic book is, this is going to be great as well. And it's going to give you great insight on what do you have to think about when designing a comic book page. So the script. You can write it or draw it depending on the process. And yes, I mean write it as in a screenplay or movie, or draw it, which honestly is what I prefer. Of course, when you're working mostly with a writer and you're the illustrator, it's probably the writer is going to give you a written script. But if you're working on your own and you are not too much of a writer, as I'm not, basically, and you just have this story visually, you can go and jump right into the thumbnails and start scribbling your story. And of course, later you come back and revise it and just polish what you already started. I say this because I took so much time just banging my head into a blank page trying to write, when I discovered that my brain just doesn't work that way, and I could write stories and dialogue much easier just by drawing. And so I admire a lot anyone that can really write a script. That's not me. But it is still very important to know how a written script works. Even if you're not going to write it and you're going to just go straight to drawing, you still are going to probably work with a writer at some point or another. And therefore, you need to understand how a script works and how do you have to work with it. So when you're writing a script, it is important to understand that either you or someone else later is going to have to draw it. So you should be very detailed and on basically how you're going to break it down into the page, because like that you avoid something that is one of the most common mistakes when people start writing scripts, and is that you basically want to put everything into the page in one panel, and that is impossible. That is impossible for whoever is going to draw it, or even for yourself, to realize that you have 3 different points of view, but just on the first panel, and that just doesn't work. So be very aware of, well, the fact that someone or you yourself has to draw that later. And also consider the amount of dialogue and captions that you're going to add, because that takes up space in the scenes. So just as an example, let me share. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to present something else. Are you able to see the script that is on Yes. Great. So this is a script for Teen Titans 34. So this is very typical, this way of presenting it. Teen Titans 34, 1 year later, New Teen Titans Part 1, Geoff Johns. And I'm gonna scroll right down to page 2, because I think that is more of a typical page than the first one. So as you can see, the writer specifies the page and the panel. So wait, page 2, panel 1. And he even leaves some notes for the artist. This page is 5 panels, like page 1. They're all of equal size, stacked on top of one another. So this writer is very specific. He even basically already gives indications of how the page should be designed. It's probably someone who is already very familiar with how a comic book page should look, and he is going for something very specific. This is not necessary. It also depends if you're working with someone who is, well, more trusting of your work or less controlling of their story, more, I should say. So some people are just like, this is how many how this is, has 6 panels, 5 panels, and you organize them however you like. But generally, they will add the number of panels. And again, there's a million ways to write a screenplay and to write a script. And every writer is going to be different. Everything that you do as a team, it depends on how much have you worked together before, and if how much you can accommodate to each other. And if it's yourself, well, that's very easy. So panel 1, we start with something very, very common, and it's that he is giving us just an understanding of where we are. Now, the static begins to give way just a little. We can barely make out Cyber's point of view here. He is in a computerized room designed to rebuild him, large bank of computers monitoring his vital signs, from brain activity to heart monitoring to breathing. So again, just letting us know where we are, and that is something that is not only expected, but necessary. Because again, the reader needs to visualize where the story is happening, first of all. Even if they don't know exactly where in the planet, they need to know it's a lab. It's a computerized room. It's, it's somewhere full of technology. And since our protagonist right now is cyborg, that makes sense. So again, leaving us notes. Tony, I'd like you to really spend time on this background, add as much detail to it as then stat in the panels 2 and 4, pages 2 and 3. Sorry for my reading. I have my eyes kind of blurry because I'm getting better from being sick. Anyways, continue. So we see what text do we have to add, and then dialogue. And then we go to panel 2. So it goes on like this. As you can see, he specifies which page every time at the beginning of each new page that he comes up. And this is very useful for whenever you're kind of lost in between panels and reading, and you can go back to the top of the page and be like, oh, okay, this is page 2, this is not page 4 or 3 or 5. Sorry, my cats are kind of getting into a fight. So this is something that I hope is useful for those who have never seen a comic script. Let me go back to presenting. All right. So here I am presenting you with multiple resources. So this is a template that I found on Stens, who is an artist. And, it will give you some guidelines to how to start a script. This is another web page that allows you also to have to write your script in it, and just allows you to have an idea. They already have kind of like the template in it. Oh no, sorry. I think that one I didn't add it, but I'm gonna add it later so you have it. This is a web page where you can find multiple professional comic scripts that have been donated, so people can go read them, practice your pages. How would you draw your page if it was a script that was sent to you? It has, from all kinds. It has superheroes, it has more of indie comics, it has very old, very new, a little bit of everything. And these are movie scripts, which I found also very useful to kind of learn how would you make it how would you transform from a movie to a comic book. Again, not too different, but it makes you kind of have a broader way to how do you work, and a bit of a practice of having curved lines that people can throw at you. So yeah, hopefully that will be very useful to you to have some practice on your own, because the more pages you put out, the better you're gonna get. That's as simple as that. A lot of stuff in art is just practice, practice, practice. Great, thank you. I'm gonna still send all of this, so you will have it probably on a drive or something. And the school is. Can you probably, Amanda? Can you help me send these links and all that to them, and basically the presentation later? Great, thank you. So, the page. Once we have our script, we have to start designing our page. And we're not gonna work directly in the final, the final page. Because if you have never tried to do a comic book before, you would set yourself up to failure. Because we need to get our ideas straight first. So we usually start with a thumbnail. And this is where we're doing the actual designing. So comics is its own medium. It's not like movies, it's not like video games, it's not like anything else. It's really its own medium. The page is our world, and in it there's space and time, and we control the space and time in a graphic way. So space is controlled by the shape of the panel and whatever you put in the panel, its surface. Whatever there is inside, that is your space, that material part of that world. And time is determined by the size of the panel, the gutter, and the transition between panels. So let me see. Okay. So I took this page from Scott McCloud's Making Comics because it's a Bible if you're just starting, or even if not, and you don't know Scott McCloud, which I don't blame you, because I come from Colombia. There's not a lot of resources. So if there's anyone that is from overseas or that it's not in Canada, we don't have all the same information. So this is a great resource. If you can get this book, it's amazing. It will really explain everything there's a need to know about comics. So Making Comics, great book. But I took this page specifically because it explained the panel-to-panel transition. So this is something that you have to take into account when designing the page. So the page is the space that you have as a page and whatever panels you're putting in. And depending on the transitions that you're planning, it could determine how many panels do you need. So those transitions can be moment to moment, action to action, subject to subject, scene to scene, aspect to aspect, and non sequitur. Sorry, that's a kind of hard word for me right now. Give me a second. I'm gonna turn on this light. There we go. Oh, hello. I'm so sorry for my cat passing by. I don't control them. So that is Cruella, my assistant, apparently. Shoot. So moment to moment is really just stretching that time. It's kind of like a slow motion. You want to really squeeze that second, those moments, that the micro gestures that you are expressing in the page. So again, just like a person blinking, or just really doing like the sequence, kind of like in animation, of how a person is moving. Action to action, it's a little bit faster. As it says, single subject, person, object, etc., in a series of actions. So, just a little bit more paced, even though it's not, you're still in the action of the person or the character or the object. Subject to subject is more of a bigger step, a bigger space. So it's quicker, basically. It's someone is pointing towards somewhere and you go directly. You don't show, an action. You show this person is pointing, this is what they pointed at. Scene to scene, transition across significant distances to time and space. So basically, scene to scene is you're somewhere with your subject, you cut, you're somewhere else with another subject, for example. Aspect to aspect, transitioning from one aspect to a place. Transitioning from one aspect of a place, idea, or mood to another. So this is very common, actually, in, for example, Japanese animation. So anime or Ghibli movies or that kind of stuff, which I'm sure this public is kind of familiar with. It's just staying in something very atmospheric. So droplets in on top of a leaf, and then going to the sky, for example, just like very atmospheric stuff. And non sequitur is a series of seemingly nonsensical, unrelated images. It's very weird to find them. I feel like they're not as common. It does happen, but it's for a specific effect. And at first, generally, it's for like a more of a confusion that you want to express, or just like you want to show unrelated stuff, but maybe you want to relate them in, I don't know, a style, or it happens, but it's used scarcely. So where do we start with our page? I feel like, because everything starts in your mind. There's stuff that you have to consider and think about. So to design a comic book page, we always start with a thumbnail, as I said before. And that is where you have to basically figure out how many panels are you going to put in this page, which is depending on if you are writing a script or not, or if the thumbnail that you're doing is your script. So is it specified? Is it not? Is it possible? Sometimes you will find some writers that will ask you for an impossible amount of panels for one page. Or again, they will put a lot of action and a lot of stuff in one panel, and you will have to have a conversation about, we need to break this down. We need to put more panels for this. We need to basically stretch this out or shorten it, depending on what is happening. How many actions then are you going to put in your page? How many transitions? How how much does it has to happen in that page? What information do you have to showcase in order for the story to advance and be understandable? Because again, if you decide to advance very rapidly in your story, in your moment, then are you putting enough information? Or do you need another panel to add information in order for the story to be comprehensible? All this is already what you start to think about when you already have your script, or you're just jumping into thumbnails in order to write your story. And that's why we do thumbnails as well, because we want to put the pen on the paper or our tablet or whatever you're working and start scribbling and figure it out. How many panels does this page really need? Does this work? Is this comprehensible? So how do we decide how many panels? It also depends on style, and it also depends on how do you work. What is the style of that? What is the style that works better for your story? So if you're just starting doing comics, and even if not, I still find a great exercise to start with a 9-panel grid. You're not going to, like, it's the best way to avoid a reader to get confused, to get, lost in reading. It's very straightforward. And with a 9-panel grid, you get to really concentrate on what do you put into the panel. So that's where the, how to say it, you really showcase more your drawing instead of the composition. And there's not the variety that you add to your page is really on what you put inside. It doesn't mean that you don't get to do design and composition on your page. So here are some examples of Watchmen from Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, which is absolutely glorified by everybody that has ever read it. And as you can see, there's a lot of different compositions that happen with color. For example, these alternate with the colors in order to make it more like a cross. Is super interesting. And again, you really concentrate on what is happening inside the panels. So if you're just starting, great way to just not have to think too much about how are you going to compose your panels. And it's really a great way to get better, just because you're giving yourself a very big restriction. And it doesn't allow you to get lost in the trap of not being very clear on how people should read your comic. Sorry, I haven't paused for a while. Any questions so far? Okay. Great. Since I haven't received any questions. So yeah. This one, for example, V for Vendetta, also from Alan Moore, we see a theme of who is using the 9 panels, and David Lloyd. So we're gonna dive a little bit deeper on how you get for people to follow the flow of the panels a little bit later. But even now you can see how basically every panel, Pollo. So I have another assistant called Pollo. I'm so sorry. He is insisting on saying hi. I was saying, for example, and especially on this on the second sorry, on the second page of V for Vendetta that I have here, you can really see how the drawing guides to the next panel. So each drawing, we start here with V, and this is going diagonal, and then we just jump. Oh, sorry. Why does this keep appearing? There we go. So this already sends us to this bubble right here. Then we go down, then our eyes follow this straight line towards this bubble, and we continue with these face here that is kind of curving towards here. And that's how you go back here. And again, this is very straightforward, because even if David Lloyd is doing this very intentionally, we don't notice it as much, because that's kind of the point, the fact that you flow through the page without noticing. But also, the reader knows that you usually read from top to bottom, from left to right. So with a 9 panel, it's very straightforward. They know that after here, they go back to the second row. And after here, they go back to the third row. So that's the great part about the 9 panels. Any other question? Was that clear? Okay. Give me 1 second, please. Very eventful here on my desk with my cats. So if you say, I want to vary from the 9 panels, that it's not really what I need for my comic or for this page in particular. Oh, sorry, I forgot to comment something else about it. So different from, sorry? Oh, I'm so sorry, I cannot hear you. Hello? All right, let's continue. So the 9 panels in Watchmen are all very much the same. They have no different sizes, or they're all the same surface. This ones start to vary. So as you can see, there's some that are smaller and some that are wider, and that creates a pacing as well. So you can also play with pacing even if you're doing a 9 panel. So when using different panel sizes, consider the smallest panels are read quicker, as I was just saying, while larger panels slow down the pace. So it's just how much information can you take in when reading it, and how fast you can do it. And so usually smaller, just faster to read, and therefore you could just go straight to the next one. If it's bigger, if the panel is bigger, then you just take more time to do it. That's just how time works in comics. You control the timing based on the size of the panels. If you're just starting, keep it simple. Rectangular shapes are dynamic and can offer great versatility. So here are, some ways to stack 3 panels, 4 panels, 5 panels, 6 panels, 7 panels, 8 panels. So again, you can choose however many. I feel like 9 panels is already, like, for most people, on kind of like it's already a lot of panels. So as you can see on these ones, they're not very big. You're not showcasing a lot, and your drawings have to basically get in there. So this is why getting some more big panels and therefore less panels in your page is also useful, especially for establishing shots, for backgrounds, for very background heavy detail work, or for very impactful. For example, you want a big explosion or a big reveal, then use a bigger panel. As simple as that. It's comics. It's a lot of very simple stuff that whenever you want to do it all at the same time because you're doing a comic, that is when it becomes harder, basically. But it's not rocket science. It's just difficult to master, and it requires a lot of practice. So here are some examples of just different paneling. And for example, the human target is a gorgeous, gorgeous comic that just very well done. If you want like a very well done, beautiful comic to read and to study, that is absolutely a great choice. Hawkeye from David Aja is an amazing comic book to study if you don't know it. Maybe you're not too much into like superheroes, but honestly, that book is a masterclass on designing, a masterclass on how to use panels to a maximum. And like David Aja puts like sometimes 20 panels and just like little squares, and allows for a designing of a page that is spectacular and very intricate and very fresh. And I don't know how he does it, but it's amazing. And this is, sorry, Yuko and Anat, which I have recently found. I couldn't find actually from which comic is this page, but they are, you can find them at their web page here at the top that I put. Sorry. There we go. There we go. So here at the top, I put their web page where you can find tons of their comics. They're great. Great coloring, great composing, great stories. And again, I would suggest keep it simple. And even for most of the pages, I would say if you really don't have any idea on how many pages should you add, and if there's no specifying on your script, or maybe you again are jumping right into the thumbnail and you're worried about either about readability, about it being too small or too big, between 6 and 7 panels, it's a sweet spot. You will find it as the most commonly used. So in case of any doubt, that's a great choice. And now we're going into artistic panels, or what I call artistic panels. So basically is whatever falls into not a square. So just shaping panels differently, getting elements of characters out of the frame, just going very, again, artistically and wild with your composition of the page. This is where graphic design gets into comics. Everything that it's about, like paneling and really doing composition on your page and figuring out what the big picture is going to be, it's where just having some notions of graphic design is very useful, because you get to pull out and be more of a designer than, the mind of the artist that works just a little bit different. And I feel like in comics and in so many of the adjacent um, industries, it's so important to have a little bit of a graphic designer in you. So this type of panels and this type of design in your work makes for a very unique, very interesting page and artwork, and just of and so, but it's tricky. I would say it's not for beginners, because it becomes, you can easily fall into the trap of not being very clear on how people should read your page. And that is a trap that, again, you will have to try and fail and study a lot in order to not fall into it, because you want your comic to be readable. You want everybody to read it and be immersed in it without having to basically be pulled out of the story in order to figure out, where do I go next. But if well done, it can be very immersive, and again, it can make it very interesting to look at. Very it can give a very specific taste to your comic. So this is Sarah Webb. Great page. Again, just and she didn't do something very extravagant, but she just changed that triangular shape down there. Sandman, specifically the G.H. Williams III version, he is a master at this. He has basically pulled every shape, every possibility of this in Sandman. It's just so spectacularly weird and still readable. And even when it's not super clear, it's on purpose. It's made to confuse. It's made for you to feel in space and floating. But most of the time, all of the time, it's very, very readable, which is an accomplishment for how weird it gets. So if you are really interested in doing very just different panels and just having that artistic license of just paneling your comic whatever you want, he's definitely someone that you should study very, very hard. And another example that I have, and honestly my personal favorite, is Witchat Atelier, which, if you haven't read, absolutely just recommend, because first of all, adorable, wholesome story, full of intrigue and just fantasy to the max, and the most beautiful art and paneling that I have ever encountered until now. Like, this is the comic that I wish I have done myself, because again, she is able to make these very different panels, very different showcase of what a panel should be, but it's not something that pulls you out, but immerse you even more. You basically get more sucked into the fantasy of the world, instead of being like, oh, this is a weird page, or oh, this is kind of different. No, it doesn't necessarily makes you notice it, but in a way that you feel kind of like more into the world, because the page expands beyond the panel. Basically, the world expands beyond the panel in a very elegant and beautiful, beautiful way. So I cannot praise this enough. Any questions until now? Be free to unmute yourselves if you feel more comfortable unmuting. Give me a second. Oh, yes. The lucky penny from Yuko and Anna. Yes. Great recommendation. So if there's no questions, I will continue. So the panel. The panel itself isn't separate from the page. It plays a crucial role in how we experience the entire layout. Our goal is to immerse the reader in the story, making the panel feel seamless, much like how we don't consciously notice the camera when watching a movie. To achieve this, the design with each panel should guide the reader's eye smoothly to the next. So this is what we were talking about earlier, where, as you can see here, I have to confess, I don't really know where these pages come from. I just found them and decided that they were useful for this. So basically how the drawing inside the panel, basically as a composition, works in order to guide your eye towards the next panel. And this happens it basically works with your composition as a drawing, and where do you put your text. So balloons are very important for this as well, because once again, we read from top left to right. And so if you don't have that into account and basically put your balloons in a way that they are not in that order, because you go from top to bottom, basically you're kind of disturbing the reader's experience. So take into account balloons as well. So again, this is a great exercise to do yourself with comics that you read or comics that you find, or even just random pages. Figure it out if where your eye follows and where the lines of the drawing leads you, because a lot of people read comics, and most of the public read comics, but they are not aware of the willful manipulation that they're falling into. Because again, these lines are very specifically the eyesight. It's also a very good indicator of where are you going to look next, because it's basically, if a character is looking towards something, we are likely to follow that look somewhere. Same here. This taxi takes us here, then we turn here, and it's something that you will think it happens on by accident, but it's by design. This is one of, I feel like, the most difficult stuff when you're starting, because it's something that you take into account, and it suddenly becomes restrictive at first. but it's a good restriction because, again, it just makes the experience of reading it much better, and you are making comics for someone to read them. So same here. So the balloons, and even just how we go through this drawing to this balloon, then next. So for example, if this balloon was up here instead of down here, we would go from this panel to this one, and we would stay in here instead of going all the way to the first one. Our eyes would stop here because it's in our line, in this line. So we want all these balloons to be down here. And again, we start with this one and go to this one. And even the, the arm with the sword, then these arms just go straight to this balloon. So that's what you have to think about when composing your page and what you're putting into the panels in order for the reading to be smoothly. The best way to improve this, again, is just take different comic pages and study how they do it in each page. How did they allow for things to be so smoothly guided? And learn, and just read with your brain turned on, and try to copy it. If you're if you're practicing and doing a comic book page and you're not really sure of how to do that, try to look for similar pages and see, okay, how did they do this as a practice? So inside the panel is where we end up with the most difficult part about art in general, and is the fundamentals. So I put first visual development because it's such a broad umbrella. So whoever, if you don't know what visual development is, it's basically it's mostly used in animation and movies and video games in order to put a name to the artist that designed the look of that movie, that animation, that video game. So it's everything from character design, background design, just really the look of it, the world that you're going to live in. And unless you are working on a pre-existing IP, so for example, if you're working for Marvel and you're doing, I don't know, Captain America, then you already know the character, then the character is already pre-designed or pretty much already completely designed. The world is already designed, so you just have to be very good at copying and just be able to emulate what they already have. Of course, in your own style, because they will probably hire you due to your style and due to your ability to tell a story, but it's already designed. But if not, if you're doing your own graphic novel, if you're doing your own story, then that's where you have to basically figure out how to do that part of visual development, which again, it's a lot. It's not only characters, but creatures, but props, but also color keys, just what is your color palette for your comic, all that. It's a little bit overwhelming, but kind of like the best part as well. So it's very key to have that in order to be able to basically do your comic. Composition, of course, everything that we already saw. Perspective and backgrounds, gesture, anatomy, and dynamic posing, and inking, coloring, lettering. That's basically, if you're going to do your comic alone, that's all you need to know. And it is a lot because something that I feel comics is very different from any other industries is that we are multitaskers. We and we are we very much need the full umbrella of skills. And again, if you're and this is if you're not writing the story as well, because on top of that, if you're doing everything solo, then also you need to learn how to write. And this is not to disencourage anyone, because all of this is achievable. It's a lot, and of course you are probably gonna get better at some stuff than others and faster in some stuff than others, but this is also what makes the journey very, very just interesting, because you're never done. You're always getting something new, and whatever you learn, you can apply it to your comic. And it's very rewarding whenever you start putting it all together and you're like, oh wow, this now looks like, a real comic. So this is where the slides end, but now we're gonna go into I'm gonna go into basically doing a little bit of a demo, so we can both be there when doing the designing of this thumbnail. And I'm not even gonna go all the way to finishing the page, because the most important thing that you need to learn is how to do thumbnails. That's really where you will craft your storytelling, where you will really advance on your comic. Because if you don't get the thumbnails out, you can have 3 beautiful pages and then be stuck in the 4th one. And that's not the idea. So let me stop presenting. There we go. Are there any questions so far? What are the blue lines? Oh, do you mean on the, wait, let me go back. Let me go back. Sorry, I didn't see your questions. So these blue lines, kind of correspond to when your eyes get sucked in. So the first time that you are seeing this image, basically the composition makes you go straight to here, the heart of these buildings. And the red ones are basically where it travels to next. Same here. So if you arrive here reading again from left to right, this taxi just goes straight to these characters. So again, this is all done very very explicitly, so you cannot basically be confused about where you need to look at, because these red lines from this page just guides you to this character. And same if you're looking from left to right, it all ends with this character. So you're really going to just look at this character right where the artist wanted you to. Again, art is basically a willful manipulation. You are manipulating your reader in the best way, because they want to be manipulated. They want you to succeed, and they want you to basically give them a good story. If not, they wouldn't be reading. Any other question? Mm-hmm. So does color composition have the same effect of drawing a reader's attention as shape composition? Do you need both? Well, ideally, yes. But it also depends on where you put the accent. So it depends on your coloring. For example, there's people that are very loud in their coloring, that they love very saturated colors, and it can work very, very well. Again, like seeing the Watchmen. Wait. So, for example, these are very loud colors. These are very saturated. They work perfectly. And they, for example, in these ones, of course, the red ones grab your eyes first. And so, how do I express this? But they work together basically. So if you want, wait, let me find another example that I feel like it will explain it better, because one is not exclusive to the other. They should work together, but sometimes you want to basically give one or the other some protagonist time, so give me a second, because I want to show you a better example of, for example, when color can just be the main character of something. This is good. And where is the other one? This. So let me oh, let go here. So for example, this one that I have saved in Pinterest. This is a great way to use color in order to make your eye go straight to where you want, or just emphasize something in whatever you're showing in your page. It still works with the composition. As you see, the panels guide you in a C curve here, and still emphasize another element. But for sure, this is a way of using color in order to make something pop out. Another one, where was it? This. So this is another panel that I found uses very, in a very smart way, the color. Again, that red against that muted gray, that muted green, just, it's very striking. It pops off very strongly, but it's still kind of guidelines here. And it's for sure to make our eyes concentrate on him. So yeah, I hope those are good examples. I hope that that was clear. Knowing aerial perspective helps with your paneling as well when you're working with color. Yes, that's true. Yes. Sorry, so I'm gonna stop presenting. Who else has a question? I heard a hand going up. Oh, okay. So how about I give you all just 5 minutes just for you to basically go to bathroom. In the meantime, I'm gonna open up my Photoshop and we're gonna start doing demo. Sounds good? Great. Great, great, great. All right, so I'm gonna turn off my camera for 5 minutes and we will be back at wait, 5 minutes might be. I'm basically gonna do this pose a little bit earlier. Do you guys feel okay about just returning at 7:20? That's the only pose that we're gonna do. Yeah. Okay, sweat 7:20 it is then. There we go. So, let's see, where were we? Is there any questions about what we talked about earlier? Welcome back, everybody. If you have any questions that just has popped up, something that maybe was not clear, something that you already had in mind before and before coming to the class and now you want to address. No? Maybe something that in your workflow you have found difficult to do or that you don't know exactly how to do. All right. So let's get started with the demo. Let me share my screen. Finding reference for complex backgrounds. There's a lot for that. I would say practice a lot to just basically work from photos. I use a lot of Google Maps, just like sometimes just dropping in and dropping the little guy in the map and finding interesting places to draw. But also make sure of how are you observing the environment that you're in and the environment that you're making. Because so one of the good things that I learned at Max, thanks to a great teacher called Dave Ross, which is amazing at doing comics and just an incredible skill of drawing. he made sure to teach us how to basically give depth to our backgrounds, which is the most important thing in order to really make it seem like it's a world that your characters are living in. So little stuff like uh, basically the making sure that something is tangible, and it's as simple as, well, if this thing is, if for example there's a door. So simple stuff like doors, windows, ceilings, um, floors, they all have a certain depth that, uh, for example, doors have to be pushed in most of the time. They're pushed in a crevice, and just drawing that crevice will allow you to give that sensation of backgrounds, and will make it um, complex without it being really complex. Also, for complex backgrounds, study just basic shapes. Study really simplifying stuff on very basic shapes in order to be able um, to take them to life. Uh, there's really, I feel like the more you study those basic shapes, and the more you are able to draw them from an imagination in different angles, it will allow you to, it will help you to simplify what you're looking at, and that way um, just break down the process of doing those complex backgrounds. What else? Also, just, and I have difficulty with this still. um, Learn how to fake complexity. So just how to do noise in your drawings in order to not necessarily draw every little single detail and still make it look detailed. I don't know if that's clear or not. Uh, Maybe I can show you basically what we're doing. Any tips for faking detail? Um, what I've done to get better at that, because again, I have a lot of trouble in it because I am I struggle with perfectionism in a way that I just get, I need to draw every button perfectly. And sometimes that actually works against your artwork. So I make an effort to not get sucked into details that are not that important. And something that has helped me with that is just concentrating on um, on values. So if you concentrate on values, the most detailed stuff becomes shapes. And then you start to recognize, okay, these are actually the shapes that I see without going into every crevice, every little, you know, every little thing that that surface has, that whatever you're drawing is. You just learn how to kind of blur it together and separate whatever it's enough in order for you to feel like, oh, this kind of makes it look what it is without me drawing everything that I need to draw. So and this, you're gonna hear it in a lot of places. Squinting is a very good way to do that. So just like looking at stuff between your eyelashes just blurs everything and makes you concentrate on value and shape. uh and like that, you kind of um just resist the urge to go into every little thing. uh Was that useful? Great. So, any more questions? Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Then, um, so something that I was very fortunate to. Uh, Wait, can you see my Photoshop page? Yes, 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 yes. All right. So since I'm gonna be on Photoshop, probably I won't be able to look at the same time the screen, basically the chat. So if you have any questions or want to do any comments or want to, let me know, maybe my screen is not, it's not showing, or something is happening and you need to communicate it to me, open the mic. That's the easiest way. So, because I probably won't be able to see it since I'm, in Photoshop. Oh, so something that I was very lucky to have at Max was a layout teacher. So what is it? So my layout teacher was Ken Burrows, which is an amazing human being, honestly, and just I feel very fortunate to have him, to have had him as my teacher. And that whole class was about designing the comic book page. Was about, okay, how are we going about this? And oh, okay, let me see something. How is it that we are designing our pages? And he would give us a lot of scripts. He will give us a lot of just different challenges. One that was very, very famous was the Mary Jane challenge, which is basically, okay, you have it was a Spider-Man script where Mary Jane was just talking, and there was absolutely nothing interesting in that page. And I mean nothing. It was just oh, sorry, the most boring page. And that was a challenge because you needed to learn, okay, how do I just, oh, sorry, how do I just make this page interesting? Uh, Very difficult. So those are one of the things that if you're interested in the school, it's one of the best classes if you're, again, wanting to do just comics and that's your goal. And even if you're more concentrated on illustration, it's a great exercise for uh, composition and just learning how to do sequential art, which even in illustration, there's a lot of demand for, because maybe you're interested in illustration for children's books. And in that case, you still have um, the you still have a need for learning how to do sequence stuff and just learn how to tell a story. Uh, Wait, just give me a second because I'm having a lot of technical issues here with my tablet, which shouldn't happen. What is this? I'm so sorry, guys. Okay, see, I already missed a bunch of questions. So, do you recommend only using Photoshop to create panels? Can they be created in other programs? Honestly, for comics, there's a lot of stuff that you can, of programs that you can use. You can use Clip Studio, you can use Procreate, you can use everything that works. I found people that do comics on on Illustrator in vector programs, which I'm like, how? But it works for them. So it depends on what you want to use and what you get familiar to and what you find best for your own process. I personally use Photoshop just because it's what I'm most used to. I also use Procreate depending on what I'm working on, but uh, actually I do use a lot of Procreate for my comics. Clip Studio Paint is good software for paneling. Procreate too, yes. I was actually gonna ask if it would be easier to do a grid in InDesign and import the graphics. Again, whatever whatever you find that your process it's more comfortable and fast for you, that is a good answer. That is the right answer. Especially, I feel like for people who are more in animation and concept design, they do have programs that are more strict, that basically because they have to share a lot of documents, and they basically work in a pipeline that it's more complicated than comics. Then they have to work on certain programs that allows for the smoothest process. But for comics, I don't find it that it's uh, that difficult. Wait a second, this is not working well. Because of course everything was working fine yesterday, and now I have problems with my tablet. Oh yes, if you are trying to work comics into Illustrator without knowing Illustrator first, for sure it's going to be difficult. I still find it difficult, honestly. And yes, Procreate, the thing is the layer limit. Especially if you're going to do something for printing. Because if it's a comic for like a web comic or something that you're going to post only on web, then basically you can allow yourself to do your canvas very small, which will help you with that layer limit. But if not, if you're going to print it, that's when it becomes kind of tricky. Actually, Maria Mickelman, who is here with us, is going to give a Procreate workshop at some point as well. So be ready for that. Oh my God, I'm gonna go crazy. There we go. Oh, now it works. All right, can you all see my Photoshop again? So sorry for that. Yes, 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 yes. Thank you very much. All right. So I'm gonna go in, because again, I want to, if possible, have more than one thumbnail done here. So we can all figure out a little bit more of the process. Hello. Oh my God. I'm sorry, it doesn't want to turn into a pen. Again, working perfectly yesterday. What happened today? So sorry, guys. In other news, my cats have found peace and they're not longer fighting. Oh, there we go. Please work. Oh my God. So am I still here? Yes. No, that's gonna be a little bit more complicated, I feel like. Because there. It works. Fine. So as you're gonna see here, I'm not gonna do a proper page. because this is going to be a thumbnail. And I'm even doing this thumbnail a little bit big in order for, just for the sake of presentation, basically. So what is going to happen on this page? Let's plan it out. Shall we? I already have sort of like a template for my page in my mind, but I would find it way funnier if we kind of figure it out together. So if you have, for example, a random character that you want to give me, that would be great. So, any ideas? A worm. Perfect. A worm has to do what? Eat an apple? And cross a puddle. Yeah, perfect. A worm has to cross a puddle to get to its apple. So we already have everything that we need to know about this page, about what's going to happen, or at least what's the end goal. So as it is a custom, I'm going to start with an establishing shot. So we are probably in the backyard of somewhere. And as we said earlier, this frame is as if it was our camera. And as we know, the camera is our point of view. And so our point of view is very important because it will give us a lot of information about the drawing, basically. So if this is our frame and this is our camera, it could be looking straight forward. It could be looking up, which is called a bird's eye view. It could be looking down, which is a worm's eye view. So this, depending on where our camera is, will give us an indication of our perspective. So a little bit of insight on how perspective works. And it basically, so how do we translate the position of our camera in our frame? And that's where we use a horizon line. So this horizon line, depending on where it is, it can indicate the position of our camera. If it's low, if it's down. So let's say our camera is here, our horizon line is here, which means we will see a lot of the floor. So that means we have a bird's eye view. And if our horizon line it's down here, it means we will see a lot of the sky, which means it's a worm's eye view. So there you have a little something to think about when you're starting your illustration or comic book or panel. And it's, where am I starting with? So just for the sake of having a little bit more fun and keeping the worm's eye view for later, I'm gonna actually put my horizon line very high. And so something that we are able to do when doing this thumbnails, and again, I'm not being polished here. I will wait to polish whenever I am doing the pencil for my comic book. This is the planning stage. So I'm not going to just basically get stuck into drawing pretty. So in your horizon line, you are able to put just your grid. Once you have your horizon line, you can put a grid. Does anyone know what a grid is besides Maria? Or is that something that I should explain in order for everybody to be in the same page? Yes, it is for perspective. So perspective is very important to take into account when you're first planning your page, because it will allow for you to have an idea where to start your illustration and how and what are you going to show. And sometimes it's very difficult to start from just blank, you know, to place your characters in just, or your background in just blank. So, okay, I don't have too many answers, but I'm gonna just, you know, indicate what a grid is. So if you have set it a little bit of perspective, in your horizon line, you will put some some vanishing points. So your vanishing points can be from 1 to 100. The most used ones are 2 vanishing points. So let's change here and here. So usually for a grid, I often use 2 vanishing points. It just allows me just to get a better understanding of my space. So this is a grid. It's basically all the lines that converge on those vanishing points. And I'm just doing it in a very casual, not super accurate way. I'm just trying to put something in here, some indication of space in my frame that allows me to just draw a little bit more efficiently. So I'm gonna say that I am just in the backyard somewhere, in a backyard of a house. And let's say there's, I don't know, there's a balloon from a kid. That there could be a tricycle, since we established that there's a kid in that house. Tricycle is laying down. There's a lot of grass. Here is our puddle. Sorry, it's a little bit delayed. Ooh. Oh, there we go. Hmm. I don't want the lasso tool. There. What happened here? Oh my gosh. So in the meantime that my computer wants to obey me, is there any questions about the grid? Was that clear about how the grid works? Yes, yes, yes. What is the purpose of the grid? So the grid allows us to basically put a floor and a sky on your frame. So instead of just building something out of thin air, you suddenly have basically a perspective, b again a floor and a sky in order where to put your stuff, whatever you're going to draw, be a character, an environment, um, an object, and so, and especially for establishing shots and backgrounds, it's something that just works best in order for you to plan out where are you going to, how are you going to show that background. For very broad, basically for very, very broad points of view. What else? Let's say there is, I don't know. We can shape this up better later. So here's our puddle. Here's our apple. This is a backyard. Maybe we start seeing a little bit of the fence here. There we go. So now we can go in a little bit tighter. And now I'm going in with basically a lower horizon line, which means my camera is way low and it's looking up. And we are meeting our protagonist. A little warm. Poor thing. And in between the grass, what is he seeing? A magnificent apple. So since I want to showcase this apple here, I am very basically very aware of how I'm showing it. And we're gonna see a little bit of composition later. And you're gonna help me make this even better. And now I have all this space. I'm probably gonna cut it in 3 because I still need to do a ton of stuff in this page. So our worm rushes through the grass And I am going to do a close-up of our worm. And show that he stopped because of the puddle, and how little and insignificant he is next to the puddle. Therefore, a big challenge. So this is a thumbnail. As you can see, I pushed in a lot, but usually I just work at this distance, or if I can, even a little bit smaller in order to not be, sucked in. But since I'm with you guys, I wanted you to see what I was drawing, basically. um, is this the best page of the world? No, it's not. But it tells a story, and it's, if I think I'm correct, pretty clearly what it is about. There's a backyard, there's a worm in the backyard, there's an apple that he wants, and he has a terrible problem that it's the puddle in between him and the apple. So now, thank you. So now let's see how we can improve this. Because I did it very intuitively. So now let's see if we can just add a bit more of professional thinking to this. Because again, the thumbnail is not supposed to be what especially your first thumbnail is not the page that you're going to do. It very rarely is. It can happen. I have it. It has happened to me that sometimes I do 5 different thumbnails for one page, and the first one was the best one. But it most of the time is not. Actually, most of the time, the first one is just not the best one. So, since you already have this out of your system, the first draft, now you can start thinking about how to improve this. Because sometimes just thinking about it, sometimes is very difficult. I'm also aware that there's people who actually are able to plan out everything on their heads. I have a friend that is like that. She basically thinks and thinks and thinks and thinks until she has whatever she wants to actually put in their page. And I would say she's the exception to the rule, because thankfully she's very skilled. So whatever she puts on the page generally, sorry, works very, very well. But most of people need to actually put the draft on paper and think on paper and think while doing stuff, while actually, materializing their thoughts. in order to be able to work on them. And also having multiple passes and having multiple options for your editor or your client, for your writer, for whoever you're working with, it's a good thing. Being able to show the process is a very good thing. And generally, people who are going to hire you a lot due to the process that you have, because they can see it, they understand how you work, and they understand that they can then give you feedback, which is very, very, very important. Also, something that I actually applaud this MTM because they really push you to learn how to have feedback. And again, people cannot give you feedback on your thoughts. They need to see it. They cannot read your mind. So this is going to be our second page. Sorry, not our second page, our second thumbnail of this first page. But first, let's have a chat about composition. So I cannot give you a full course on composition right here, and which you also would have at MTM if you go to MTM. But I can give you some pointers, some basic compositions that you will find on a lot of just graphic work. It could be, I don't know, animation, storyboarding, illustration, visual design. Like, these are pretty often used. So first, we have, again, our frame, just where we delimit the world that we are going to see through our camera. And this frame, composition is basically how you divide this frame. In how many ways, how different ways you can divide the frame that you have and arrange the elements that you have in it. And depending on how you divide it, you're going to have just different results. So, for example, if you divide it in a 50-50 way, so basically like this, it's a very centered, it's very balanced. It's also a little bit boring. It can work. It has its place in an illustration, in a movie. It has happened. It has worked. And once you see it, you're like, oh yeah, and it has its purpose. But not often used unless for a very specific purpose, because again, a little bit boring, not very natural either. There's, for example, the 20-30. So if we divide 20-30 of our frame, and I'm just taking like this rectangle as a frame, but it can be whatever shape, because again, in comics especially, we use a lot of different shapes. So you're basically dividing this. And what does this mean? What does these lines mean? It means that this is where you're going to place something, you know? So here, for example, you can place a character and you can place another character. So that's what that means. The next one, let's see. It's is the rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds, and this is very known. It's basically this. Wait. Wait a moment, it's charging. There. So that means that in these 4 points, you will be able to put whatever you want, meaning a character, you know, or whatever element you want the eye of your spectator to be at in each of these 4 points. Basically, the eye of your spectator will go to that. This is the most used. This is basically thirds. This is the most used on everything, on movies, on animation, on video games, this on illustration. This is, it just gives a very natural vibe to it. It's not super straight. It just works. And then at last, there's the 1090, which is a very extreme, not as used. And basically, it's when your horizon, it's basically when you divide your space like this. And it can also be, you know, on the other way, where you put it like this. It's very extreme, but it's also very stylish, I feel, very stylistic. So if, for example, you put your 2 characters like here, or they're like here, it's a lot of environment. It's very pulled out. So the camera is very, very far away. Or, for example, if you have, I don't know, a table here, and there's just this little itty bitty space here. So there's many ways to use all of this. So these are very basic compositions that, again, you will find everywhere. And it's something to think about when you're composing your panels. Next, we're going to be seeing other types of composition that are more basically self-explanatory. But I do want you to see them. So, for example, there is big versus small. So big versus small is exactly that. There's a big, generally monster creature, I don't know, something. There's a big something, and your protagonist is also small against this big challenge. It gives a scale, it gives a lot of, basically it ups the stakes of your character. It's in order to actually see the difference and the unbalance of power in a scene, which again, very useful. There is uh, what I call the keyhole. The keyhole is basically when there is a scene and you're trying not to really uh, you're basically wanting for your spectator to not be in the scene but feel as if they were intruding. So there's someone on the other side of the keyhole, and this can translate to other stuff. It doesn't necessarily has to be a keyhole. It's just called like that because it's very used in that way. But it could be I don't know, someone looking at a window and you're outside. And so the point of the scene is what's happening inside the window. But again, as a spectator, you're outside. There's the famous arrival shot. And this is very used, for example, um, in visual development, in movies, in so many stuff where you have your character, the camera is very pushed back, and you're just taking in the scene. And maybe, for example, there's a city, what, who knows? You know, you're just the information is about where you're at. And finally, oh no, sorry, there's two more. There's the altar piece. So, for example, uh, I'm assuming you have seen Aladdin, the Disney movie. So when he first finds the lamp, that's an altar scene. You know, basically all the focus is on this object, or it can, I figure it can be also a person. Again, you can turn this into very different stuff, but all the focus is on in this element. But usually it's an object, and usually it's very environmental type of artwork of scene. And finally, there's a close-up. And there's a close-up and an extreme close-up, which can be, for example, just the eyes of someone. Close-ups are very important because you connect with whatever has a face, basically. So whatever has a face is what you're emotionally connected to. So any questions about that? Is that clear? Am I still here? Yes. Alrighty. So there's way more to composition. I mean, it's a whole field of study. MTM has its own class for it. You could spend so much time learning about it from different illustrators, just different mediums. But these are very good rule of thumb to start with. So now with this in mind, let's figure out how we can do our warm story a little bit better. So, for example, let's change our composition, because here it did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 panels, which again, not bad. We don't have any dialogue, which if I had, by the way, I would start with the dialogue. I wouldn't start with the drawing. If I had my frames already determined, I would start by putting the dialogue bubbles in them. And this is to avoid something that it's very, very common to be a mistake on people who are just starting out. And it's the fact that they don't leave space for the bubbles. Because one of the difficult things about comics is that we work in a very limited space, and we have to share what we put in it uh, with the lettering. So in order for you to put your beautiful dialogue, or the writer's beautiful dialogue, you have to account the space for it. So in order for you to not get carried away with the drawing and then having to cover it up with a bubble where you don't like the placing of it, where you're just like, you spend, I don't know, you have your character that you put a lot of time into drawing the hand of it, and you spend hours drawing this hand that just was, the best hand you ever draw, just gorgeous, beautiful, just Leonardo da Vinci will be proud of your hand, and then you have to cover it with a balloon. Not great, not a great experience. So in order to avoid that and be sure that you're going to work with the space that you actually have to use, start by making sure that your balloons are placed in order for you to not you know, draw and then have your balloons being awkwardly placed or covering something that you don't want to cover. So very important. So let's say that this time I'm going to do 9 panels. So in the first one, I was kind of figuring out how many panels I was going to do, you know, while I was doing them. I was deciding the space. This time, I'm going to decide first how many panels am I going to use. And it's, again, it depends on how you work. I just prefer to change stuff up. If I already did it one way, in order to figure it out at the end of the day, what is better, I try everything that occurs to me. Wait. So sorry, it's a little bit delayed. Again, is there any question, any doubt, anything that you want to address, comment, that wasn't clear? Oh, okay. So Paige is asking, I missed the beginning, so you may have stated this already, but how many panels should be on one page? As many as you want. There's no hard rule about it. I would say that it depends on your composition, on what you're going to tell, on what's the main focus of your page, on basically what is your goal. There's I was putting the example before of Hawkeye, um, this Hawkeye comic that just uses, and sometimes like 20 panels, and the panels are just like squares like this, and they do a fantastic design on the page. But again, they're showing very small stuff, or they're doing very specific stuff about it. I wouldn't start by that if you're just starting to do comics, because again, that is a very uh, specific use of the panels, and it's very it certainly took the artist a lot of years to arrive to that way of designing. When it came out, it was very unique. When that Hawkeye issue came out, it was very unique. It was, everybody was uh, talking about it just because it was that impressive, his design. So that is a good example of what it could be accomplished. I wouldn't start there because it can be very difficult to actually do something readable. You can start how I'm doing now with the 9 panels. So 9 panels is very straightforward. It's very classic comics. It allows for you to not have to figure out like just how readability is going to work in your panels. Um, and it takes a little bit of the pressure of designing the page. But most of the time nowadays, a lot of people use less panels than that in order to be able to just add more variety in the story and more pacing on the story. So for example, here I have 6 panels. And as a rule of thumb, I would use between 5 and 6 panels most of the time, or 6 to 7, just because that ensures me a lot of readability. It's not too small, it's not too big. Most of the pages that you will encounter, it's probably between this. And then you start to vary depending on, again, the page that you're doing. But if you don't know where to start, this is a good number. But again, it depends on what you're doing, what you're going for. It doesn't have to be any number. It can be between 1 and 100. Actually, let me, since we are already on the topic, let me show you another Hawkeye example. So this is better illustrated in your minds. A full Pinterest board of just layouts that I find interesting. And later I will go and find and basically find their comic and read them, you know. So for example, this is or this is a Hawkeye-ish page. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So already 12 there, which is a lot. And as you see, it's not too big, most of them. He made one establishing shot in order for us to know where we are. And then everything is basically details and very small. Or this one, which is very interesting. It's a whole conversation. And it's kind of like the Mary Jane problem, where you just have 2 people talking and, well, what are you going to draw? And he figured out a way to make it very interesting in his page. So this is a lot of panels for a comic book page, and it works. So this is a masterful way of doing it. Again, if you can get your hands on this comic, I absolutely would do it and study it, because it's amazing. Sadly, I don't have a copy of it myself. I had to read it thanks to someone that I borrowed from. But yeah, again, very interesting panels. This, it's all Hawkeye. So yeah, this is a way to put a lot of panels in your story. Would I recommend it? Like, again, if you're trying to go for readability, I wouldn't. But it's a good way to experiment, and it's a good example of what it's possible in comics if you want to go, this route. Was that useful? Yeah, I don't know if I can share my Pinterest board with everybody. I will try to send the link. Oh, that was Hawkeye. Sorry, I forget the name of the artist, but anyways, it's on the presentation, so you can go back to that and see exactly what issue and name is it. All right. Alrighty. So no problem. So that said, let's go back to our worm. So again, as I was saying, because you could try many combinations of just how many panels you want, how do you want them organized. And this is the whole point of doing the thumbnails, just reorganizing and organizing and reorganizing as many times as you need this page in order to find the best combination. And even if you have the same number of panels, this could change. This page could change a lot, because I could do, instead of with those same 6 panels, sorry, with those same 6 panels, I could do this as my establishing shot instead of, a long format. I could do this to show my worm. I could do this to show the apple. Wait for it a second. Hello, Photoshop. Would you mind working? Here we go. I could do this to show my worm rushing to the other side. Wait, God. Let's say my worm is here. This as his face, and this to show the basically the water. So it's the same thing. I haven't changed much, but it's a full different combination, and it still has 6 panels. So even if you don't want to change the number of panels that you have, you can play a lot just in between the same number. And I could make another, another 10 combinations of this. There's so much to do. So this is why we do the thumbnails, because again, so many opportunities to find the best, just the best combination. And if you're working with an editor, if you're working with someone else that you need to show your work, and even for yourself, to be sure that, okay, this is actually the best option to tell your story, it's a great way to actually show it and visualize it. And if you need someone else's opinion, which is always great to have, then you need to be able to show your page instead of being like, yeah, I want to do it like this, like that. The other person is not in your head. So we need, specific visual um, examples of it, of whatever you're doing. So now we have these 9 panels, and I did 9 panels in 9 panels in order to just, again, get out of the idea of how many panels should I do, and how should I compose my page. So in order to do this, with the information that I gave you about composition, there's certain things that we need to show. So for example, where are we? Our establishing shot, in order for the reader to understand where is all of this happening. So that it doesn't necessarily has to always be the first frame. And for example, we could do more of a aspect to aspect, type of paneling here. And again, these are just ideas that start to come out when I'm doing the thumbnail. So for example, since I have a little bit more than 6, that was the original idea, I'm going to, I don't know, showcase the tricycle here. And I'm not going to draw it all, but here's a part of tricycle. And maybe when I draw it, it's going to be a little bit more clear. Here is going to be maybe the balloon. Hello. Maybe I'm going to put like a big leaf here in order to put, I don't know, some perspective in it. A little bug. And for example, this is getting into my ratio. So I'm thinking of this as 2/3. So if I'm going to do that, I'm going to make it a bit smaller and put it here. If Photoshop allows. There we go. So like that, I already know that my drawing is a little bit better in its composition. And again, I can scribble something and go back to it, be like, oh, that balloon is maybe a bit too big, so I'm gonna make it smaller. Because at this stage, I'm not being precious. I already don't mind erasing whenever I'm being very polished with my work. Because it's, you cannot be too precious with your work, basically. Something that I learned from one of our teachers, and I'm sure Maria, who was with me at the time, at MTM remembers, this one teacher was doing this, well, Dave Ross, which I already mentioned, was doing this absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous drawing illustration that we were just like watching in awe. And suddenly he erases half of it. And it was good. I mean, we couldn't find what was wrong with it, but he just wanted things to be better positioned in his composition. And he was like, yeah, this is just one drawing of a million. Don't gasp, because you have to erase if you're going to make it better. So, and so if he was able to do that with this amazing, beautiful work of art, like, you can erase on your thumbnail, or even just restart, or go back with, another color and decide, oh, this is bigger, this is smaller. Go ahead and don't be too precious. And now, for example, we can showcase then our whole, let's do a little bit of a grid. Sorry, this is there. I'm going to do a very high grid. So again, my camera is very, very high. So I'm here with, and maybe not, maybe, what do you guys think? Should I change the positioning of my camera compared to the first one? Should we change that? Oh no, Maria, it was Dave Ross. Oh, don't worry, to those who have to leave. It was a pleasure. And again, this will be recorded. And we're almost done anyways. Let's do bird's eye. Okay. So we're going to do even a more extreme bird's eye view then. And let's keep it around here, our pond, our little water. Maybe here is a tricycle. And maybe here is the balloon. And here is our apple. And grass. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, I'm actually in the wrong layer. God. Now, let's meet our worm. So this could be very much a keyhole moment where we're not really close to the worm, we're getting close to it. So we have our grass, and he's just chilling. So thanks to this framing of the grass, it becomes sort of a keyhole composition. So what other composition could we use? Mm, we could, well, the altarpiece for the apple is definitely a good decision. So an altarpiece, again, can be in whatever, however you want it, but for the sake of going fast, I feel like the one that I did here, it's good enough. So I'm gonna just emulate that one a little bit different. It's shiny. It's very, very shiny here. Come on. And he sees here through the grass the apple. And that's an altar scene. And now, and again, we're switching things up and making it very much just dynamic, but what it's inside. And let's do, for example, a close-up here of him, of his eyes just beaming. Thanks to the apple. And so this is a more slow pacing than what I was doing on the one before. The actions go slower and I'm just detailing a little bit more, you know, his emotions. Even from the beginning, since we are not jumping in the action, we're just admiring the little details of the backyard, then that kind of slows it down. And now we can show him rushing. I pull back again, and maybe this is very similar to this, and I want something, and I want to vary that. So in order to create more interest, so maybe I should make it, I should pull back my camera basically. And I should in which direction is best? Maybe like this, basically as an indication of my camera being pulled back. That's a big worm. And maybe here I can make an effect of him just stopping, just like, you know, maybe the dirt. Getting lifted. And again, I don't know if any of these are good ideas. I don't know if this is a good idea or if it's understandable, but I will find out if I just draw it. And here I'm going I'm going to basically hold the reveal of what stopped him. And it's basically him looking at the water, and maybe on the next page then I can show sorry, I can show, and maybe it's a spread, maybe I can do a big spread. I can show that it's, for him at least, a humongous lake. Here's the apple. Here's the rock, here's the apple. And this will be like the second page. So I am purposefully holding on the surprise in order to make the reader more interested to turn the page. And maybe that is that is something that I didn't take into account on the first one. So I can do, again, 10 of this, just of this little worm finding his way to an apple. And those very different compositions are going to tell the story very differently. And depending on that is where I choose, this is the most exciting one. This is the most, maybe I want something more into ambience and maybe something more cutesy and chill. They will all give me just different results. And based on that, you choose which one is the best. And maybe you have an editor or a friend, and they will give you a sign of which one is the best, which one tells the story that they are more attracted to, which ones is the more clear. So I hope this was interesting to you. I hope this helps you in the process. And I personally will do all of what I have thought of as a comic, as a thumbnail, and it becomes that my comic. And later it's just easier to go back and start your penciling and your inking and just be into the art and not so much into the thinking of how are you basically how are you telling the story, because then you're just working. And if you have a deadline, then it's better to have everything thought out instead of being, very close to your deadline and not knowing what to do and be blocked and have writer's block, or having just artist block on how do you want to draw this. So take the thumbnails first. That is your comic. That is your comic page. That is your comic book. That is your graphic novel. Everything starts with the thumbnails. So I hope this was, again, useful. I hope this, I don't know, helps you in your journey of doing comics. And it would be great to see some thumbnails of yours. I don't know if I have brought anything new to you that you didn't know about the process of doing comics. But if not, always good to revise. Oh, that's so cool. I would love to see the thumbnails. Again, I am just very happy to share all this, and all these are stuff that I learned at Max, and I was passed on thanks to great teachers. So if you are interested in the school, absolutely go check the sequential program. Amazing artists and teachers, and I'm just passing on what I already learned. There's so much more to learn. There's so much to practice as well. And each of the stages that I show you are things that you should practice on its own, and multiple times. And if you have someone that can give you feedback, that just accelerates your process. So I hope you are all having a good night, and yeah, you can you can reach me on my Instagram. Let me actually it's let me write it down. So if you want to reach me, if you want to show me your thumbnails, if you have questions about the school, about, I don't know, if you are overseas and are interested in studying in Canada, I can give you some tips about that as well. So yeah, don't be shy. Anyways, hope you have a good night. So if you have to run, go ahead. Bye bye.